Welcome to Keeping Score. I'm Rick Horrow. Each week we bring you insights from the playmakers, deal makers, and rule makers in the world of sports. I'll give you my take on some of the items of the week using my 30 years of experience doing deals for teams, leagues, and players in the $750 billion business of sports. Plus, we'll talk with a central figure in the sports world. The views expressed in this podcast are my own and do not represent the views of Reuters. Let's get started. Scratch Rory McIlroy off the list of Olympic competitors. The winner of 4 major golf championships has decided to skip the Rio Games because of health fears over the Zika virus. The 27-year-old was due to represent Ireland. McIlroy said even though the risk of infection is low, quote, it's a risk nonetheless, and a risk I'm unwilling to take. He joins fellow golfers Vijay Singh of Fiji and Charles Schwartzel of South Africa, who already said they wouldn't compete. The mosquito-borne Zika virus can cause crippling birth defects and in adults has been linked to a neurological disorder. And while all Olympic venues have some degree of controversy 180 days out, the breadth and scope of these concerns seems unprecedented. A big win for the NBA and a big loss for the NHL. We're talking TV ratings. The dramatic Game 7 of the basketball finals between the Golden State Warriors and Cleveland Cavaliers drew the highest ratings since Michael Jordan's last finals game in 1998, according to NBA.com. The audience topped 30 million viewers. That's about 6 times what the Pittsburgh Penguins hoisting the Stanley Cup drew after Game 6 of their series against the San Jose Sharks. That was down from the final game a year earlier. The NHL Finals overall saw TV ratings fall nearly 30% from a season ago, according to NBC. Yet, the NHL captures postseason momentum, officially awarding Las Vegas an expansion franchise beginning play in 2017. And the high TV ratings for the NBA come at a great time for the league. Teams are busy trying to secure jersey advertisements, which will show up on uniforms starting in the 17-18 season. Cleveland Chief Revenue Officer Brad Sims tells Sports Business Daily the Cavs are putting all of their resources toward this effort during the summer. The team could get $10 million a year from the ads. The team with the worst record this past season, the Philadelphia 76ers, already signed a $5 million per year jersey deal with StubHub. The obvious prediction is that Commissioner Silver's 3-year test period for this will quickly become permanent. Now, the business of tennis and the effort of major governing bodies of the sport to work together. I talk with Ken Solomon, president of Tennis Channel. You've taken a new step and the Sinclair purchase and realignment. So give us some of the details and what it means to the Tennis Channel and the business of televising tennis.
Sure. Well, and jump in and stop me at any time as you will. But when the network was formed almost a dozen years ago now, at least ideated and then brought to market, it was done backed by private equity. So this moment was always going to come, and frankly, logic would have dictated that it would have come sooner. But we had a great club of both angel round investors who were serious, cable executives and luminaries combined with Bain, Battery, Columbia Capital, and J.P. Morgan. And, they recognized that we were doing something very special and gave us a much longer timeline than usual. They also allowed us to really build the network to something approximating full scale as opposed to kind of just working our way in and then saying to a prospective owner, hey, you put in a lot of money to make it what it needs to be. And if you had been able to write the script, you couldn't have written it any better than having Sinclair, and that is not puffery, that is a fact. They are really the perfect new owner and partner. Our team is effectively remaining the same. We are staying right here in Santa Monica base, even though they are based in Baltimore. A lot of people want to know the answer to that question. And it's very, very exciting. They bring a tremendous amount to the table. They bring the ability to scale, and that was evidenced, and I'm sure we'll talk more about it, by upon announcement, the fact that already deals had been done to add a minimum of 20 million additional subscribers at rate to our 30-plus million that we already had. And going north, that's just where we were to start on announcement. And they also bring 171 television stations and the ability to tell the story of tennis domestically and very, very hyper-locally through 171 stations, news and sportscasters in most of those stations. Most of those stations are in the top 80% of the country, going all the way up to Washington, D.C., WJLA, the ABC affiliate there. And there's huge, huge opportunity to continue building out this sport in the way that we have, using a national footprint of a tennis channel that we believe will be, in the range of where Golf Channel is, probably 70-plus million homes in the foreseeable future, combined with that kind of a local broadcast footprint. When you take the value that this sport has, from the players to the way it's played year-round, to the fact that it's every day, and that we couldn't possibly cover it all on one network, and that it's growing, and that our ratings were growing without distribution growth, it's a pretty great setup for what we think is going to be a really exciting and perhaps continuing to be an interruptive future.
So as we're off and running and we're into the major season now, timing couldn't be better for all of this. Tell me, if you had a magic wand and you were the commissioner of tennis, and you're a lot closer today than you were a few years ago, let's say, what would be the one thing that you would try to attack and evolve in the game today? Governance, rules, structure, blank slate.
There's a lot of stuff out there about players and matches, and is it all on the up and up and all that, and I think that's being handled rather well. It's not an immediate process. Everyone wants an immediate answer, but I think the result of what started in Australia with the BuzzFeed article about match fixing and things like that and gambling is what people are going to find through the processes. It's an infinitesimal amount of malfeasance going on in the game, and that the game itself is incredibly vigilant at attempting to find maybe two, some would argue, at attempting to, root out anything that would make it other than a meritocracy in terms of who's best. And so I think that's all being handled well. You can always keep your eyes on it and try to make it better. For us on a macro level, Rick, in some ways we're trying to do it from our little place in the world, which is getting to be a larger place, which is to bring it all together. And the difference between tennis and so many sports, particularly the U.S. stick and ball sports, is that there's no central singular governing body. And that's perfectly fine. We might not exist if there were, or we'd probably be owned by them. There is some good that comes from having singular governing bodies that can bring together, create alignment among all constituents, and then move the sport forward. The men's and the women's tours are two different, ATP and WTA are two different things. The majors are all uniquely owned. Some are private, others are parts of their countries. Every country has its equivalent of the USTA, representing it. And then we haven't even broken into college. There's so much. There's the ITF, who controls the cups, who sanctions the majors, and who's sort of a governing body above it all, but doesn't have the jurisdiction to make things happen in all of it. And for us, it's pretty simple. Bring it all together, because when you put it all together, no sport can match tennis in terms of the quality and consistency of the product on a year-round basis, with individual stars that are superstars that transcend the game. You still have Roger Federer at the top of the list, of that Forbes list you mentioned. You still have generally 3 women in the top 50 and 3 men or so in the top 50 year in and year out, beating movie stars and other major sports stars. And that's just kind of a magic combination. So for us, it's bring it together. You will always have individuals who say things that sound like we're not together. And the more that we can create alignment, the faster tennis can continue to compete in the world sports arena against other sports on an equal footing.
Do you think long-term the organizations are moving in the right direction to see that ultimately there has to be more coordination than there is today, or not?
I think there is, and that doesn't mean that it's perfect. Nothing is, nor is any marriage. You look at, I'll go back to, I like to highlight the good, but let's go back to what some people thought was, not such a great day when this article came out about Australia, creating an accusation that the governing bodies were conspiring to cover up some kind of a mass match-fixing gambling thing. Well, the truth is, it was, if anything, the exact opposite. Generally, it's harder to get people to agree on anything than it is to get them to conspire. But when this allegation came out, we saw a very ordered, organic, impromptu bringing together of the governing bodies. The ATP and the ITF led the way. Dave Haggerty, who's now running the ITF, who is a former USTA chairman, and now running the International Tennis Federation, as well as Chris Kermode, who runs the ATP. They were, in effect, deputized by all of the governing bodies around the world. All of those governing bodies came together. They created a plan, they got organized, and they got it out. I would have preferred, it would have, in a perfect world, all you would hope is that would have happened somehow magically in one day instead of a week. That wasn't very realistic, considering no one saw this coming, and it was, on the first day of the eve of a major. So I do think there is real movement. You see more combined tournaments, and when you see combined tournaments, you see better. You see things like Indian Wells here in California, where Larry Ellison, is clearly the archetype of, hey, look what happens when you make investment in tennis. They have created something that is, for all intents and purposes, a major in terms of its scope and scale, or very, very close. And, the other thing is it's working. We know it's working because you can't seem to buy a ticket to a major tournament anywhere in the world. I mean, they sell out the moment they expand, their capacity, building new stadiums and creating new capacity. That capacity is filled as a gas fills a pipe. So progress is, I feel a little like the president. Everyone wants everything overnight, and we all know progress is slow, but we're making progress. I think tennis is at a point where it is the equivalent of the stock market going from 600 to 1600.
And by the way, the president has been underpaid as well, so you have something else. So
and other than we're a distant third to golf and basketball, but the first lady is the one who holds and Malia and Sasha are the ones who are holding up the tennis rackets in the White House.
Yeah, well, and that gets to an interesting point. If I'm a world-class young kid that has athletic ability, let's say in the United States, but could be worldwide, and I have many options to get into many kinds of sports, why in the future am I going to be moved to become a tennis player?
That is an excellent question, and it's one that we talk about here. Increasingly, we believe, Tennis Channel, and people we talk to, that there should be a similar approach to other sports in as far as looking first for the best athlete. What tends to happen is if a child of any economic stratum, right? I mean, this can happen in public parks too, what I'm about to say, and it certainly happens at private clubs. Has the access, then it's the sort of Gladwellian, tipping point of having 10,000 hours, and they're most likely to be teed up to find a way to create a world-class competitor. But do we start the funnel in the right way? And I think the answer is that can be much, much better. That is something we are looking at, and the incentives need to be on par with the incentives for other sports. There's just no question about it. The good news is Tennis Channel, at the very least, in addition to thinking very seriously about facilitating what you're alluding to, is helping fulfill at least part of that, in that kids aren't going to want to do something if they don't see their heroes on television doing it. And that was a central thesis of us starting this all the way back. Why should a young girl who lives in South Central Los Angeles, whose hero is Serena Williams, or, by the way, maybe Maria Sharapova or Aggie Radwanska, why should she not be able to see her heroes doing what they do best? Over 93% of Serena Williams' matches last year happened live on Tennis Channel. And if we didn't have full distribution, far too much of the population wasn't having an equal shot at seeing that. You weren't going to create that motivation at the root level for kids that's so important. You talk to any major athlete and say, what made you want to do this? And they will tell you that moment they saw one of their heroes doing something, either in person or on television, and that spurred them to aspire to greatness and to believe they could do it. So You're right in your question, and that's going to be a part of I think a part of our new ability to scale, and finally having some weight and leverage to do good. I think that's, we'd like to be a big part of that.
Ken Solomon, always a significant ambassador for the industry, but now the guy's got more passion than ever, and the chains are taking off. What a prolific foundation and prospect in the future for tennis. Thank you, Ken.
Thanks, Rick. Great to be with you. We'll see you on the court.
Oh, yeah. Appreciate it. Thanks for listening to this edition of Keeping Score. I'm Rick Horrow. The producer of the show, Alex Cohen. Associate producer, Bethel Habte. Assistance provided by Tanner Simpkins and Carlos Waddick. And the executive editor of Reuters Digital, Dan Colarusso.